From the moment we're born, our sense of self begins to take shape. Not from within, but from the outside. The people around us give us names, labels, roles, and expectations. As children, we learn to see ourselves through the reactions of others: praise, punishment, love, and rejection. This external feedback forms the foundation of what we believe to be our identity. But what if the you know is just a carefully crafted story? A narrative stitched together by your environment, shaped more by survival than authenticity. Psychology has long questioned the stability of the self. What we think of as a core personality might simply be a flexible set of behaviors molded by context. In other words, you might act differently with your parents, your friends, at work, or alone, not because you're pretending, but because your self is constantly adapting to fit each situation. The danger is when we start believing that this constantly shifting performance is who we truly are. We get attached to a version of ourselves that was created to be accepted, not to be honest. This illusion of a consistent self gives us comfort. It helps us make sense of our actions and decisions, even when they contradict each other. You may consider yourself a kind person, but remember the last time you lost your temper or hurt someone unintentionally. What happened to that identity then? We rationalize these moments as exceptions, rather than evidence that we are more complex and perhaps more fragmented than we like to admit. Dark psychology invites us to go deeper. It asks uncomfortable questions. Who benefits from you believing in a fixed identity? Who taught you what is good, bad, acceptable, or shameful? Often, the answers trace back to systems of control, family, dynamics, cultural norms, religious structures, and even marketing tactics. The more predictable your identity is, the easier you are to influence. When you say, "I'm just not that type of person," what you're really doing might be repeating a script written by someone else. And then there's the role of trauma. Experiences of pain, rejection, or fear don't just leave emotional scars, they shape how we see ourselves. A child who grows up feeling invisible may become an adult obsessed with being noticed. A person who was once humiliated for speaking their mind may adopt silence as part of their personality. These are not choices, they are defenses. And over time, these defenses become identities we wear so long that we forget we ever put them on. So when you ask yourself, "Who am I really?" the answer might not be simple or comfortable. The self is not a solid object. It's a shifting reflection, formed in the mirror of others, carved by emotion and maintained by the stories we cling to. To question who you are is to open the door to transformation. But first, you must accept the possibility that the version of you you've always known may not be entirely real. Every day, without even realizing it, we step into roles like actors in a play. We become the responsible employee, the loyal friend, the obedient child, the charming partner. These roles are not inherently false. They are part of navigating the social world, but over time, they can become so deeply ingrained that we start mistaking the role for the real person beneath it. We don't just play the part, we become it. What starts as a way to belong becomes a mask that shapes our very sense of self. And the longer we wear it, the harder it is to take it off. Masks are not always created out of deception. Often they begin as protection. A child who learns that showing sadness brings ridicule may adopt a mask of humor to deflect pain. A teenager who feels unsafe expressing vulnerability might embrace a tough, indifferent exterior. As we grow, we carry these early survival strategies into adulthood, wearing them so long they start to feel natural. We forget where the mask ends and the real face begins. And when others respond positively to these roles, it reinforces the illusion. We think, "This must be who I am," when in truth it's who we've learned to be. Dark psychology explores this process not as a harmless adaptation, but as a subtle form of self-erasure. The more we depend on the approval of others to define our worth, the more we suppress what doesn't fit the image we're trying to maintain. We start censoring our thoughts, filtering our emotions, and editing our reactions, not because they're wrong, but because they might threaten the role we've become attached to. Authenticity takes a back seat to acceptance, and over time, this can lead to a quiet, internal emptiness, a sense that something essential is missing, even if everything appears fine on the outside. The danger isn't just personal. When everyone around us is also wearing masks, social interaction becomes a game of illusions. Relationships are built not between real people, but between personas. We fall in love with someone's mask, or worse, we try to become a mask we think someone else will love. Entire lives can be built on this fragile foundation, and when it eventually cracks, when the truth leaks through, we feel betrayed, confused, even lost. But the betrayal isn't always from others. Sometimes it's from ourselves, for having hidden behind a mask for so long that we no longer know who we are without it. There is nothing inherently wrong with adapting or evolving our behavior in different contexts. The problem arises when we become trapped in these adaptations, unable to express anything outside them. The mask, once a tool for connection or safety, becomes a prison. And escaping that prison requires courage, the courage to be seen, not as the polished version of ourselves we've presented to the world, but as the raw, imperfect, contradictory human being we truly are. Removing the mask is not about revealing something fixed underneath. It's about rediscovering the freedom to be more than the roles we've played. We like to believe we're in control of our actions, that we make decisions based on logic, intention, and conscious thought. But the truth is far less comforting. Beneath the surface of awareness lies a vast and powerful force, the unconscious mind. It influences your choices, colors your perceptions, and pushes you toward behaviors that feel like free will, but are often just well-rehearsed patterns. You think you're choosing your path, but how much of that choice is truly yours? How much is simply a reaction to invisible impulses buried deep within you? The unconscious doesn't speak in words. It operates through sensations, images, memories, and emotions. It stores every experience you've ever had, especially the ones that were too overwhelming or painful to fully process. And because it's out of reach, it can shape your life without your permission. You might find yourself pulled toward people who mirror unresolved issues from your past, repeating dynamics that hurt you, or sabotaging your own success for reasons you can't explain. This isn't coincidence. It's the unconscious pulling the strings. Psychology has long shown that our minds are layered. What you think of as you is only the surface layer. Below that are drives and desires shaped by childhood, trauma, culture, and even ancestral patterns. You may believe you're being rational, but more often than not, reason is used to justify a decision that was already made in the emotional basement of the mind. You feel drawn to someone and then come up with reasons to explain it. You fear something and later construct a story that makes that fear seem logical. The mind protects itself from discomfort by covering the truth with explanations. But those explanations don't always reflect reality. They reflect defense. The unconscious also thrives in contradiction. You might say you want love but push people away when they get close. You might seek success while procrastinating at every opportunity. This split is not a failure of willpower. It's a conflict between the conscious and the unconscious. One part of you wants to move forward, but another part, hidden and silent, is terrified of what that change might bring. Until you become aware of that fear, you remain its prisoner. You call it self-sabotage, but it's actually self-protection in disguise. Dark psychology doesn't just study manipulation by others. It studies how we manipulate ourselves, how we lie to ourselves to feel safe. The unconscious isn't evil, but it is powerful. And when left unexamined, it rules us from the shadows. True self-awareness requires going into that darkness, not to fight it, but to understand it. To sit with the parts of yourself that are afraid, wounded, or ashamed. Because only then can you begin to see clearly. Only then can you start making choices that are truly your own, not driven by ghosts of the past or inherited fears, but by a conscious mind that sees the full picture and still chooses to act with intention. There is a part of you that you've tried to ignore. You hide it behind politeness, behind good behavior, behind smiles that don't always reach your eyes. This hidden part carries the impulses, thoughts, and emotions you were taught to reject. Anger, jealousy, pride, selfishness, fear, cruelty. It is not evil in itself, but it terrifies you because it doesn't fit the image of who you believe you are supposed to be. This is what psychology calls the shadow. And whether you acknowledge it or not, it is always with you, always watching from the corners of your mind. The shadow is not some external force. It is you, not the you that's shown to the world, but the parts of you that were pushed away because they were labeled unacceptable. Maybe you were punished for expressing rage, so you swallowed it for years until it started leaking out in sarcasm, passive aggression, or sudden explosions. Maybe you were told to always be nice, so now you smile while secretly resenting everyone. You feel obligated to please. These suppressed parts do not disappear. They sink deeper, waiting for the chance to surface, often when you're most vulnerable or least prepared. Dark psychology doesn't shy away from this truth. It insists that wholeness cannot exist without facing what has been buried. The more you deny your shadow, the more control it has over you. It shows up in projection, when you hate in others what you refuse to see in yourself. It appears in judgment, when you harshly criticize behaviors that mirror your own hidden tendencies. The things that trigger you most in others are often mirrors reflecting the disowned pieces of your own identity. But instead of looking inward, you point fingers outward, believing the danger is out there, when in fact, it lives inside you. The shadow also has a paradoxical power. It holds not only the dark, but also the energy you need for growth. The anger you repress may contain the strength to set boundaries. The envy you deny might reveal what you truly desire. The selfishness you condemn could teach you how to protect your own needs. When you reclaim these parts, they stop controlling you from the dark and begin to support you in the light. But this process requires brutal honesty, the willingness to sit with the uncomfortable and admit that you are not always the person you pretend to be. Everyone has a shadow. Pretending otherwise only strengthens it. Real transformation begins when you stop trying to be perfect and start becoming whole, not by erasing the darkness, but by integrating it, by understanding that you are not either good or bad, kind or cruel, light or dark. You are all of it. And in that complexity lies the raw, messy truth of being human. Only when you accept your own darkness can you begin to live with clarity, empathy, and real freedom. The shadow, once feared, becomes a doorway to your deepest strength. Once you begin to dismantle the illusions of your identity, once the masks slip and the unconscious reveals its hidden influence, once the shadow is no longer denied but faced with honesty, something else begins to emerge. It's not a clear answer or a fixed identity waiting to be discovered, but rather a new kind of freedom. The freedom to not be confined by who you were told to be. The freedom to grow, to change, to make conscious choices no longer rooted in fear or habit. And with that freedom comes responsibility. The responsibility to become someone not out of conditioning, but out of truth. This moment is both liberating and unsettling. Because when you let go of the false self, when you stop clinging to the comforting labels of personality, beliefs, and roles, you're left with a kind of silence. You no longer know for sure who you are, and that's the beginning of something real. In this space, there is room to explore what feels true without needing to fit into a predefined shape. You might begin noticing the small, quiet voice within you that isn't based on performance or expectation. It's the part of you that has been buried beneath the noise, the part that simply observes, questions, wonders. That voice is not Loud, but it is honest. Becoming who you really are is not about uncovering a perfect, unchanging core. It's about letting go of the need to be anyone in particular. It's about realizing that your identity is not a solid structure, but a fluid process. The self is not a destination, but a path, a living, evolving experience shaped by awareness. When you stop trying to be someone, you start allowing yourself to exist in full complexity. You stop shrinking to fit into others' expectations or expanding unnaturally to be admired. You begin to act from a deeper place, not out of reaction, but out of intention. This process is not linear. You will still wear masks from time to time, still fall into old patterns, still be visited by your shadow. But now, you'll recognize it. You'll catch yourself in the moment and choose differently. You'll know that discomfort is not a sign of failure, but a sign of growth. That contradiction is not a flaw, but a reflection of your humanity. And slowly, without forcing it, you become more whole. Not by becoming perfect, but by embracing everything you are, even the parts you once ran from. In the end, asking who you really are is not about finding a final answer. It's about being willing to stay in the question, to live in the tension between the known and the unknown, to make peace with the shifting nature of identity. And in that space of openness, honesty, and inner courage, something beautiful begins to take root. Not a fixed version of you, but a deeper connection to the ever-changing, ever-becoming self that lives beneath all the stories. The real you is not who you think you are. It's who you're still discovering.